Welcome back to Everyday Tech Explained. Ever wonder just how much battery a Tesla Model 3 uses when it's just sitting out in the freezing cold? You know, like if you were stuck somewhere overnight in a blizzard.
Yeah.
Today,
Definitely important to know.
we're diving into that exact question.
Yeah.
We've got some insights from a real-world test
Oh, cool.
done by a YouTuber up in Canada.
Wow.
And the results
Canada.
were interesting enough to get published on InsideEVs.com.
Interesting.
Oh, and hey, before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yeah, hit that button.
It really helps us out.
Appreciate it.
All right, so let's get to it. This whole thing about EVs and cold weather, it's a big deal, right?
It really is, especially with more and more EVs hitting the roads in places that, well, you know, they get some pretty harsh winters.
For sure.
We hear a lot about how the driving range takes a hit when it's cold out.
Right.
But this deep dive, this is all about how much energy drains while the car's just parked.
Okay, so let's talk about this experiment. We know there's a Tesla involved,
Yes.
freezing temperatures,
Of course.
and a brave Canadian YouTuber.
Absolutely.
Can you walk us through the details?
I can do that. So this YouTuber, he calls himself Frozen Tesla.
Okay.
He parked his 2024 Tesla Model 3 long range,
Right.
all-wheel drive, outside overnight when the temperature plunged to a bone-chilling
Whoa.
negative 28 degrees Celsius. That's
What?
about, let me do the conversion here,
Yeah.
about negative 18 Fahrenheit for our American listeners.
Wow, that is cold. I would not want to be out there, let
Mhm.
alone stuck in a car.
Nope.
So what exactly was he trying to do with this?
He was going for a realistic scenario, you know, where someone might be stranded in their car
Right.
during a winter storm. Gotta rely on the heating system to stay warm.
Makes sense.
So he sets the climate control to a comfy 68 degrees Fahrenheit,
Okay.
turns on the heated seats, steering wheel, all the goodies,
Nice.
and let the car sit for 12 hours
12 hours, okay.
to see how much battery it would use.
So basically turned his Tesla into a high-tech igloo.
Pretty much.
What happened to the battery?
Well, the experiment started at 9:30 p.m.
Yep.
with a 66% charge.
All right.
After just 1 hour, the battery had already dropped about 4%.
Mm.
And by the 2-hour mark, down another 3%,
Okay.
for a total of 7% gone in just 2 hours.
Whoa. That seems like a pretty steep drop.
It is.
I know it was really cold out there,
It was.
but is that typical for a Tesla in those conditions?
You got to remember, this was a pretty extreme test.
Right.
Exceptionally low temperature, and he had all those energy-intensive features going at the same time.
Yeah.
So those definitely contributed to that rapid initial drain.
Okay, that makes sense. So did the battery actually make it through the whole night?
It did, thankfully. After 12 hours parked in those frigid conditions,
Okay.
the Tesla still had 29% charge left,
Oh, wow.
meaning on average, it used about 3% of its battery every hour.
So about a third of the battery gone in a single night.
Yeah.
What's that in terms of actual energy used?
It ate up a total of 34.4 kilowatt hours of energy over those 12 hours.
Okay, that's a big number.
It is.
But to be honest, I don't really know what kilowatt hours means.
Yeah, it's not something you use every day.
Can you break that down for me and our listeners?
Sure. A kilowatt hour or kilowatt hour, it's basically a unit of energy.
Okay.
To put it simply, it measures how much energy is used over a period of time.
Got it.
In this case, the Tesla used 34.4 kilowatt hours to power all its systems for those 12 hours.
Okay.
Not only how much energy, but it gives us a way to compare to other devices
Right.
or other vehicles.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying. So knowing how much energy it used,
Yeah.
what does that mean in terms of cost? Like if you were stranded,
Yeah.
needed to recharge,
Real world situation.
how much would this experiment set you back?
Let's do the math. The average U.S. electricity price is about 17.6 cents per kilowatt hour.
Okay.
So based on that, this 12-hour test
Yeah.
cost roughly $6.05.
$6. Honestly, not as bad as I was expecting.
Not too terrible.
But how does that compare to a gas car idling for that same amount of time? Would it actually be cheaper to just burn gas?
That's a good question. According to some calculations based on a standard 1.5-liter 4-cylinder engine,
Okay.
a gas car would have burned through almost 2 gallons of fuel in those 12 hours.
Right.
And with gas prices being what they are.
$3 a gallon, give or take.
Yeah, around there.
Yeah.
That comes out to $5.76.
Wow, so almost the same cost.
Pretty close.
That's surprising. I figured the EV would be way more efficient, especially when it's just sitting there.
While EVs are generally more efficient, especially when driving, remember they still need to use energy for things like climate control and battery management, even when parked.
Okay.
And in crazy cold weather like that, those systems really got to work hard.
Right.
And that just, increases energy consumption.
So it's not just the motor using energy, there's other stuff happening in the car.
Exactly. And you got to remember, constantly idling a gas engine, not great for the engine either.
Oh, right.
Generates a ton of heat, stresses the engine components, leads to more wear and tear over time.
Yeah.
Plus, the whole environmental impact.
All those emissions. True. Even if the costs are kind of comparable here, the EV wins on the environmental side.
No question about it.
Okay, so back to the experiment.
Yeah.
Anything else about frozen Tesla's findings that stood out to you?
Yeah, one interesting thing was how the battery drain rate changed throughout the night.
Okay.
In the first couple hours, like we said, it was pretty high, around 3–4% per hour.
Yeah.
But as the night went on, it actually slowed down.
Really? Why is that? Did the car somehow get more efficient as it got colder?
Not quite.
Okay.
Remember, he had the climate control set to a constant 68 degrees.
Right.
So as the cabin reached that temperature, stabilized, the heating system didn't have to work as hard,
Okay.
which means, less energy use.
Oh, that makes sense. Just like a thermostat at home kicking in and out.
Exactly. And this actually brings up a good point for EV owners in cold climates.
What's that?
Preheating your car while it's plugged in can make a big difference.
Oh, interesting.
Significantly reduce that battery drain when you're driving.
So it's all warmed up and ready to go.
Exactly.
That's a great tip. Any other things EV owners should keep in mind when it's freezing out?
Besides preheating, using those seat warmers instead of just blasting the cabin, heat can save energy.
Oh, okay.
And if you can, parking in a garage or somewhere sheltered helps a lot, minimizes heat loss, reduces the strain on the battery.
So being strategic with those energy-hungry features.
Exactly, especially when it's that cold.
And every EV is a little different.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Battery performance can vary depending on battery size,
Yeah.
how old the vehicle is, even driving habits.
So this experiment gives us some insights.
Absolutely.
But it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Right, one data point in a complex world.
Okay, so wrapping up this part of our deep dive, it seems like the takeaway is EVs can handle the extreme cold,
They can.
but it comes at a cost, both in terms of range and maybe a bit of extra expense.
Yeah,
But when you think about the environment
right.
and how long the car will last,
For sure.
EVs still have a big advantage over gas cars, wouldn't you say?
I would definitely agree. This experiment, it gives us a peek into what EV ownership is really like in those tough conditions.
Right.
Helps us think about the trade-offs and make smart decisions about how we use our EVs.
Yeah.
Now, there's another fascinating thing you touched on earlier.
Okay.
The whole long-term impact of cold on battery health. That's something we really need to look at.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
That immediate cost of running the heater all night might not seem like a big deal,
Right.
but it's really important to think about what it could do to the battery in the long run.
That's true. We always hear about cold weather being bad for batteries.
Yeah.
But what does that actually mean for how long the battery will last?
Well, when a battery is exposed to extreme cold for a long time, it can speed up that battery degradation,
Okay.
which basically means over time the battery can't hold as much charge,
Right.
and eventually that leads to a shorter lifespan.
So even though the Tesla in the experiment seemed okay,
Right.
there could be problems later on,
It is a possibility,
Yeah.
and it really shows how important it is to take good care of your battery.
especially in places that get cold.
Absolutely.
So besides that long-term stuff,
Yeah.
are there any other things EV owners should worry about in cold weather?
This experiment got me thinking about emergencies.
Okay.
Imagine you're stuck in a blizzard, far from any charging station.
Oh, no.
Running the heater for hours might not be the best plan.
That's a good point. So if you're stranded in freezing temperatures, are there any other ways to stay warm
Yes.
besides just cranking the heat?
Absolutely. Having a good sleeping bag in your car could be a lifesaver.
Oh, yeah. Good idea.
Wearing warm layers, even using those little hand warmers,
Right.
can help save battery while keeping you safe and warm.
Those are great tips.
Yeah.
So being prepared for anything is really key.
Really is.
Cold weather can affect charging times too, right?
It can. It takes a lot longer to charge in freezing temperatures.
Does the cold slow down the charging itself?
It's more about how the battery works.
Okay.
Lithium-ion battery.
Which are in most EVs.
Yeah, they're pretty sensitive to temperature extremes. So in cold weather, the chemical reactions inside the battery slow down,
Okay.
which affects how fast it can charge.
So the battery's kind of sluggish in the cold.
Kind of, yeah. It's definitely something to think about when you're planning a long trip in the winter.
That makes sense. Now, what about all the new technology coming out for EVs?
Yeah.
Anything exciting that could make them even better in cold weather?
Oh, definitely. Researchers are working on new types of batteries that aren't as affected by the cold.
Cool.
Imagine a battery that keeps its charge and power even in sub-zero temperatures.
That would be amazing.
It would change everything for EV owners in cold places.
What about the heating systems?
Yeah.
Are there any new ideas for making them use less energy?
There are some really promising advancements in how we manage temperature.
Okay.
Engineers are figuring out new ways to preheat the battery and cabin more efficiently,
Interesting.
minimizing energy loss, improving how it all works in cold weather.
So it seems like the future for EVs in cold climates is looking pretty good.
I think so, and it's not just good for EV owners, but also for getting more people to use EVs in places with rough winters.
Right.
Speaking of which, there's another thing we need to consider when it comes to EVs in cold places:
Okay, what's that?
the charging infrastructure itself.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Keeping those charging stations working in a blizzard can't be easy.
Yeah.
You're right, reliable charging is so important for any EV owner,
It is.
but even more so in places with those crazy winters. So what are some of the things we need to think about when it comes to keeping those chargers up and running in those conditions?
Well, picture this. You're on a road trip in the middle of winter.
Okay.
You need to charge your EV. You pull up to a charging station,
Yeah.
and it's buried under a ton of snow.
Oh, no.
Or even worse,
What?
it's broken because of the freezing temperatures.
That sounds like a nightmare. So how do we make sure those charging stations are accessible
Right.
and working, even in the worst weather?
It all comes down to a few things: how they're designed,
Okay.
the technology they use, and how well they're maintained.
Makes sense.
In cold climates, those stations need to be built tough.
Yeah.
Materials that can handle the snow, ice, and those crazy temperature swings.
So not just any charging station will do.
Nope.
Got to be built for the cold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just the outside.
What else?
The tech inside needs to be able to work in freezing temps, too.
Oh, right.
Things like heaters to keep parts from freezing up, and software that can adjust the charging speed based on the temperature and how the battery's doing.
It's a lot more than just plugging in.
It is. It's a whole system that has to work perfectly, even in a blizzard.
Yeah, for sure. Sounds like reliable charging is key for EVs to be a real option in those colder places.
It really is. And as more people want EVs in those regions, we'll need more charging stations, and they'll need to be even better.
So we've talked about how cold affects battery performance,
Yeah.
energy use,
Uh-huh.
and the charging infrastructure.
Yes,
Seems like EV owners have a lot to consider when the temperature drops.
they do, but it's important to remember that EVs are still a great choice for a lot of people,
Okay.
even in cold places. The technology is always getting better.
Right.
And as we've talked about, there are things you can do and new innovations coming out to help with those cold weather issues.
This deep dive into Frozen Tesla's experiment has been really eye-opening.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
It shows that owning an EV in a colder climate has its challenges.
It does.
But the future of EVs is still bright, even when it's freezing outside.
I agree.
So what do you think? Does this change how you see EVs in cold weather?
Yeah, let us know in the comments.
Thinking about getting an EV, or maybe you already have one? We'd love to hear from you.
Hit that like button and subscribe for more Everyday Tech Explained.
We'll see you next time.